Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Soaring Wing Show. I am your host, Trent Wright, bringing you all things Eagles every day. Today, I'll be wearing one of my favorite hats. It's a Kelly green hat with the old helmet style, the old helmet logo right there in the center, underneath Eagles. It's got like a black rope thing, which I really think is a nice accent to it, and it's made of corduroy, actually, so it has a very unique texture. To go with that, I've paired it with a Kelly green tank top that I got in the mail just today. This is brand new. It's a little wrinkled still, but I think it goes really well with the hat, and I'm very excited to have this outfit as part of the collection. Today, we'll be discussing part 3 of my series on the Eagles' Golden Age. This episode will be mainly focusing on Nick Sirrianni, but we will reference some Eagles coaches throughout the decade, maybe a little bit of Peterson and some Jeff Stoutland love thrown in there. But in the spirit of Nick Sirrianni, I have exactly one stat that I'll share with you, and then the rest is going to be off the dome, totally improvised, just like how he coaches. So we're going to have some fun with this and channel our inner Nick and just wing it. So here we go. I believe Nick Sirrianni is the coach that the Eagles need right now and need into the future. I believe that his game management, his motivational skills, the fact that he's willing to fall on the sword for his players is very important. I believe that his win percentage is not an accident. And here's the one stat that I promised you guys. He has a 69.4 win percentage in his career as a head coach, which would put him fourth among all qualified coaches in the Super Bowl era. The Super Bowl era began in 1965. How I know this is my dad is exactly as old as the first Super Bowl. So that's a pretty long time. That's a good 60 plus years now that we're going on. And he has the fourth highest winning percentage of every coach in that time span. So regardless of how you may feel about the man, he at least knows how to win games or puts people in place that can win games for him, whether that be the players or the coaches underneath him. So let's start with the beginning of Nick Sirrianni. So Nick Sirrianni was hired to fill the shoes of Doug Peterson, which was an incredibly hard task to do. Doug had won our only Super Bowl up to that point. He had been to the playoffs in 3 of his 5 seasons, won the division twice, and obviously had a Super Bowl title to show for it. He bottomed out with a 4-11-1 record in 2020, mostly due to offensive line injuries and disagreements with ownership on whether or not he would fire Press Taylor as offensive coordinator and some other issues that we'll go into maybe at a later date. I will do a Douglas Peterson video at some point in this channel. So that's the backdrop for how Nick got the job. He was hired as an offensive assistant for the Colts when he got hired, and he was not a very well-known name in the league or by the national media when the Eagles chose to give him the job. His introductory press conference is widely considered one of the worst press conferences ever given by a head coach of any team. He stuttered and sweat and was visibly nervous throughout the entire thing and basically could not form a coherent sentence. He later admitted that he apologized to the players, including Lane Johnson, who said it gave him a lot of respect for Sirianni, that Sirianni was willing to come into the room and admit that he had a terrible presser. So that's how it started. It was a rocky start. In fact, the record bared that out as well. In Sirianni's first 7 games as head coach, the Eagles went 2-5, and there was questions on whether or not he was going to be the guy long-term, questions if Jalen Hurts was going to be the quarterback long-term. He made the move to promote Shane Steichen to play caller, from offensive coordinator to play caller, which most coaches would not do in the middle of a season. I mean, it's an insult to your ego, some coaches believe, to have somebody take over play calling for you. But he knew it wasn't working, and Jonathan Gannon, his close friend and defensive coordinator at the time, encouraged him to make the move, saying, if you don't, quote, we're all going to be fired anyway. So Sirianni made that choice to give play calling to Steichen. They improved to 7-3 down the stretch. They went 9-8. They lost their final game, but it was a game that they didn't play their starters and they were resting for the playoffs. And then they got blown out by the Bucs. But it was a very successful year as a first-year head coach, making the playoffs, increasing the win total from 4 to 9, and making the playoffs and having a general respectable season. I mean, we were in most games that year. There was very few games that I remember being blown out. I believe the Tampa game in the regular season and one of the Dallas games, or actually both of the Dallas games were a blowout, but one of them was week 17, so it didn't really matter at that point. So here you have a coach that came in, very rocky start, got off on the wrong foot with the national media, kind of looked like a goofball. One of his other quotes throughout that season, when we were 2-5, he came to the presser and said that just like a flower, you don't see growth on the surface first. The roots are planted and the roots underneath the ground, and he just went on this long tirade. And after our next loss, I remember Eagles fans actually throwing bouquets of roses at him to make fun of him. But that growth under the surface would sprout into quite a successful coaching career that is still continuing to this day. So flash forward to 2022. Shane Steichen remains the offensive coordinator. Sirianni remains the head coach. And the Eagles go on a Super Bowl run. And I would argue Sirianni played a huge role in that. I remember his game management skills were on point that year. His decision to keep Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator and not go back to play calling proved amazing. Shane is one of the most incredible offensive minds in the league, in my opinion. If he could ever get a real quarterback again, I think the Colts would be playoff contenders. But enough about Shane, back to Sirianni. I specifically remember a call that I was there to see in person. I was at MetLife in 2022 in a torrential downpour, and from midfield, Sirianni decided to call a deep ball on 4th and 7 to Devontae Smith, and when it succeeded, he sprinted down the field like a fan and waving his arms and gesturing for the camera. And one of the reasons why I relate to Sirianni so much is I truly believe I would act just like him if I was the head coach. I would be celebrating every single play. I'd be obnoxious. I'd be yelling at referees, yelling at the fans, which is one of the things he's gotten in trouble for throughout the years. But if we go through the length of the season, I would say it was an excellent coaching job by Sirianni. We got to 14 wins. Made the Super Bowl, lost narrowly on a holding call that was controversial and still is to this day. But his offense was not the issue. Him and Shane's offense, I will say, was not the issue. They scored 35 points in the Super Bowl, and if it hadn't been for one turnover and a holding call, he would have achieved his first Super Bowl title in his second year as a head coach. So we go to 2023. This is where the defense of Sirianni becomes a little bit more difficult. They started 10-1, which is great, testament to him having the players motivated. One of the other stats in the Sirianni era that I really like is he has never lost a Week 1 game, whether at home or on the road. We are 5-0 under Sirianni in Week 1. He has the team prepared all summer. They know their opponent going in, and they do very well within the first week of the season. They're very prepared, the way he prepares them all summer long. And so you start off with 10-1, everything's great, and then the defense completely collapsed. So here's where Sirianni does hold some responsibility for that. The defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, was a complete disaster, and Sirianni's decision to fire Desai mid-season and promote Matt Patricia just made things worse. So we can see sometimes when he oversteps and makes course corrections in the middle of the season, it doesn't necessarily turn out well. But here's the key point that I want to make for my audience, especially Eagles fans that might have questions about Sirianni. When we collapsed in 2023 and we lost 6 of our last 7 games and then lost the playoff game, we still finished with an 11-6 record and we're in playoff contention. And even the games we were losing were close games in which the defense could just simply not hold on. And the reason I bring this up is there are plenty of fan bases and franchises that would kill to have an 11-6 season, even if it means a playoff blowout. Think of the Browns or the Titans or the Cardinals, how badly their fans and their organizations just want to win. They would take Sirianni in a heartbeat if they could guarantee a playoff blowout because at least they made the playoffs. So Sirianni's lows are most other coaches' highs. That's something that we do need to keep in perspective here. So then we're going to take that 2023 season as face value and assign Nick the credit for the 10-1 start and also assign him the responsibility for the collapse, though. So say that season's a wash. I mean, it really was such a roller coaster of a season. We get to 2024, and here's where things get interesting. The team starts 2-2. People are calling for Sirianni's job. I remember all over Eagles YouTube, every comment section was filled with fire Sirianni. And I was the one guy, I will give myself credit here, I was the one guy that's like, you know what, let's hold on to this guy. I think we're not done with him yet. There's still some good. And I remember after the Bucks game, he shaved his head like all the way down to bald. And people were calling him Baldiani. And then after the Browns game, in which we narrowly beat the Browns 20-16, he's standing on the bleachers yelling at fans. And it was just not a great look for a head coach. But then again, it might just be my bias speaking or just how I am wired as a person. I love that shit. Like, I would be doing the same thing if I was a head coach of an NFL team. I mean, come on. And, we would go on to win the Super Bowl that year. After the Browns game, he would only lose The team would only lose one game down the stretch, and that was a game against the Commanders in which Jalen Hurts was injured, and would have two of the biggest blowouts in playoff history. The 55-23 NFC Championship game immediately followed up 40-22 in the Super Bowl over Pat Mahomes. And I'm sorry, if you can't give the head coach credit for those two blowouts, then you can't give any head coach credit for anything, because that all comes down to preparation. That is your team succeeding to the best of its ability in the toughest moments, and that is something that a head coach should definitely get credit for. 2025, the most recent year, I believe Sirianni had his biggest blunder, which was promoting his best friend Kevin Patullo to offensive coordinator. Now, coming off a Super Bowl season, you would think, maybe keeping the play calling in-house would be the way to go, although Kellen Moore did leave the building. Because of that, we were stuck with Kevin Patullo. There will be a Kevin Patullo video someday on this channel titled Kevin Patullo, Domestic Terrorist. So he's not immune from criticism, but all in all, when you win 69% of your games, you embody the spirit of Philadelphia and the Eagles fan base by yelling at people, being boisterous, going for it on fourth down, being tough, having your players prepared. I just think he's the perfect coach for this team, the perfect coach for the players that we have. I mean, the players will swear by him. Mulata said in an article that was written during the Super Bowl season that oftentimes Nick will take blame in the press conferences for plays that the players themselves just failed to execute on. And Nick was quoted as saying to Mulata, "I am there to take the blows so that you guys can go out there and play stress-free and just worry about your game and not worry about the media scrum afterwards." That's not a direct quote, but I will read the article at some point on the channel. It's worth reading in its entirety. And because of that, him being a player's coach, him motivating the players, just the actual win-loss record, that's all head coaching is about, man. It's just about winning games, and however you get there, it doesn't matter if you're yelling at the fans, or it doesn't matter if you're stone cold like Belichick or offensive genius like Bill Walsh. As long as you win, I'm satisfied with your coaching performance. And the staffs that he's built around him for this season with Sean Mannion and bringing in new offensive talent through the draft like Mekhi Lemon, Eli Stowers, I think we're back on track. I think Sirianni's learned from his mistakes of last year with promoting Patullo and went out and hired a fresh young new mind in Sean Mannion, and I think everything's going to be back on track because Sirianni at his core loves his players love him, they play hard for him, and I think we're in for a great season. I think he should remain the coach for now into the future, unless he bottoms out like Doug, because in Philly, you get one shot. If you have a terrible season, you're gone. Doug Peterson had our first and only Super Bowl title, and he was shipped out after one bad season. So it could happen to Nick too. I sincerely hope it doesn't. I think he gets the best out of his players. I mean, people thought Jalen Hurts was going to be a backup, and then Sirianni and Steichen turned him into an MVP candidate in 2022, an eventual Super Bowl MVP under Nick's leadership. So, all being said, I think Sirianni's a great coach, doesn't get nearly enough credit. Similar to Hurts, doesn't give nearly enough credit in the national media or by his own fan base, and I think he should be the coach going forward. So let's keep the Eagles' golden age running, keep Sirianni at the helm, and next episode I will be talking about the man that signs the checks for this whole operation, Jeffrey Lurie, and how his ownership has ushered in this golden era of Eagles football, because it all starts at the top. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This was your host, Trent Wright of the Soaring Wings Show. Until next time, stay soaring.